Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Tinkering with Techtic. In this episode, we're going to be going over a hydroponic system for your plants. Now, in this system, we're going to be having flow sensors, we're going to have humidity and temperature sensors. It is going to be the whole kit and caboodle. So buckle up and let's get right into it. First, we're going to connect the LCD display. Connect VCC to the 5-volt pin on the Raspberry Pi. Connect ground pin to the ground on the Raspberry Pi. Connect SDA to pin 3 on the Raspberry Pi. And connect SCL to pin 5 on the Raspberry Pi. Next, we're going to connect up our analog to digital converter to the 3.3 volt pin. Then connect it to ground and also connect it to pins 23, 31, 19, and 24 on the Raspberry Pi. If you want any additional detail on how to connect this chip, you can check out my MCP3008 video in the link below. Additionally, on my prototyping board, I added a 5-volt rail that will receive voltage through the relay after the boot sequence has occurred, a ground rail to allow for everything to have a common ground, and a 3.3 volt rail for the temperature and humidity sensor. With the relay, we're going to be commanding 3 channels. First, INT3 will go to pin 15 on the Raspberry Pi. This will wait to provide power to the 5-volt rail until the system is booted. Next, we'll connect INT2 to pin 13. This will run the water circulation pump every 30 minutes for 1 minute. And finally, we'll connect INT1 to pin 11. This will turn on the UV lights for a predetermined time of day. The relay will open and close the ground path for the pump and the UV light. For more information on relays, you can watch my relay video in the link below. Now, let's move on to the water level sensor. This sensor is a fairly granular sensor, so I wouldn't recommend it where precise measurements are needed. In this project, we are just going to be measuring high, medium, and low levels, so it should suffice. Okay, so let's connect the plus to the 5-volt rail, the minus to the common ground location, and the sensor lead to channel 0 on the MCP3008 chip. Now, let's move on to the temperature and humidity sensor. This sensor is a digital sensor, so we can connect it right away to the Raspberry Pi. We're going to connect VCC to the 3.3 volt rail, the sensor lead to pin 7, and the ground lead to the common ground. Now, I'm going to go over the simple LED circuit that I wanted to add to give an additional visual indicator for the water level. I'm using an RGB LED, but since I only want my colors to be red, yellow, and green, I will not be using the blue leg on the LED. We're now going to connect a 220 ohm resistor to each of the red and green legs on the LED. Then, we'll run the red pin to pin 14 and the green pin to pin 15 on the Raspberry Pi. Finally, connect the negative leg of the LED, or the longest one, to the common ground. And when you're done, you should have a similar mess of wires. Your setup should have all of the shown connections. Now, for the construction of the light. I just stuck my LED strips to some plexiglass and shoved the plexiglass into a slit I made in a PVC pipe with my Dremel. For the water recirculation system, I took a plastic sheet and drilled 1 3/8 diameter holes in it. Then, I zip tied a rubber hose to the base of the plastic sheet with small slits in it at each plant location and sealed the other end of the hose. This way, when the pump runs, it ensures that the base of each plant gets sprayed. Additionally, in the base, I have a water heater and air pump. Now we have our sensors, wires, air lines, and plugs fed through a hole in the side of the box and plugged into a 3-way plug. Before we get into the code, let's make sure to open up sudo nano/etc/rc.local so that if the power goes out, the system will reboot and continue to run. Make sure to use Python 3 and the path location of your file. Now, let's get into the code. First and foremost, I will have a README file in the GitHub link to include all of the libraries that are needed to be downloaded to run this script. Next, we'll define the relay pins, then the RGB LED pins, set up the MCP3008 chip, then define the analog and digital sensors. Then, before we start the loop, we'll want to pause for 5 seconds to ensure the max power draw from the boot sequence is over before powering any of our hydroponic system components. Now, we'll define the time to turn the UV light on and off. I have it set for 9 a.m. and 9:30 p.m. Then, we'll set the pump to run when the minute time is 30. This will have it run every 30 minutes for 1 minute. Finally, we'll grab the sensor values and define our water levels as high, medium, or low based on the value of the water level sensor. And then we'll output all of those values to the LCD screen. And that's it, folks. As an additional side note, I use the AeroGarden pods for my setup. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you like what you see, check out one of my other videos using the links on your screen. And if you would like to see more great content like this, make sure to like, subscribe, or even check out our Patreon in the link below.